Tanuja Ramchal, career advisor at the GCMC, and I'm here with Xiu Ling Chen. And I actually am very excited to talk to Xiu Ling because I've worked with her on several occasions, and I think her story in terms of the struggles she's faced to get where she is today can resonate with a lot of students, and it's a story that a lot of students can learn from. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for sharing that, because as I said, I think a lot of students will be able to take the lessons, and if they apply it, to have the success that you've had in terms of your job search. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Tanuja for having me here today. My name is Xiu Ling. Currently, I am in my second semester of the MS Finance program here at Baruch. And like what she said before, I'm excited to share maybe some of the lessons that I learned throughout my job search process.
So you joined Zicklin, the MS program in January, correct?
Spring.
So end of
2019.
January, the spring semester. Where were you at that point, and what motivated you to come get your master's here at Baruch?
So actually, I graduated with my bachelor, also in finance, like last summer, May. But then when I graduated, I, kind of voluntarily put myself in a situation where I couldn't find a job. Because I did everything right as a student, but I didn't do it right as a business student. I did not do any of the networking. I did not have enough insight about the industry of what it takes to get me that dream job here in New York City in the financial services industry. And so I graduated without a job, and for 2 months I sent out many job applications, and I actually have zero response.
So this is after graduation?
Right. For 2 months, and then by July I realized that this is not working out. The approach that I'm taking is clearly wasn't working out. So I said, okay, I need help. And I said, what would be the best option for me at this point? And I said, okay, I will go back to school, I'll get a master's. And so that's how I ended up applying to Baruch.
And you said you voluntarily put yourself out of a job, so I think that was like an important or an interesting statement to make, because I know in our conversations you said like you focused primarily on academics, so you had good grades.
Yeah.
But you didn't do the things that, and I see a lot of job seekers do this, where they wait until graduation, they think a job will magically show up.
Right. That was kind of my mindset. I think it's like a culture thing, because like the way I was being raised by my parents was just that like you'll become successful if you do well in school. And so I had this kind of mindset that good grades were all that I needed, but it really wasn't. And like there was a lot that I need to learn about the business field in order to kind of like target what kind of jobs I want to apply. I didn't even know at that point. I was just applying to anything.
So it was finance, but you didn't narrow it down to any.
Finance was such a broad field, but
Exactly.
I was applying to literally anything in finance, and that was a problem too. Like in any way, I think it was just like my knowledge and the approach that I was taking in applying to jobs just wasn't right, but I didn't know.
Yeah. And then you decided, okay, so you were going to take the semester off pretty much. So you took from graduation to December off, you got your GMATs and so studied for that, and decided you wanted to come back into grad school. And what changed? So what was going to be the approach that once you entered grad school?
I think so I started at Baruch end of January. I think even at that point I was really different compared to who I was like 6 months ago because of that gap that I took. So I used to be this like really passive person. I just kind of expected, if I do my part, like good things will just come, like good opportunities would just come.
And you did that, and you saw that you didn't get the results.
Yeah, it didn't work out. So I decided to think, okay, like I took a lot of time to really like learn about myself. What is it that I'm good at, that I'm not good at, and what is it that I want, and how can I, like plan my steps to get myself there. So I remember just the first thing that maybe I did when the semester started was I just go on the GCMC website and I look through, all the events for the whole semester.
Right.
And I downloaded the list, and I like basically signed up to
Register.
all the ones that I could possibly attend. So that was my first step. But even at that point, I could feel that, I was like a whole new person because of that gap, like 6 months gap that I took off. So, I mean, at that time when I couldn't find a job and I was like those 6 months, I was honestly a little bit depressed because I had a lot of issue dealing with like confidence and self-value because I think like I wasn't wanted. But now looking back, I think that 6 months was honestly one of like a growth period in my life because I learned so much in terms of self-awareness.
So you got to know yourself. You took that time to really understand what it is that you wanted. And I think one of the things you had shared with me is that you saw it, instead of seeing it as a challenge, you saw it as an opportunity where now you had all of these options in front of you. So you were not closing yourself off to by just going for a job that somebody said, oh, her resume looks good for this job, but now you saw that you had like all of these opportunities. It was up to you to decide which opportunities were right for you.
Right, because instead of seeing not having a job as a problem, which is a little bit more on the negative side, if I see it as like that I have all these opportunities that are ahead of me and I actually get to choose, then it's like I'm going onto the journey with a more positive energy, and always that's always like helpful.
So let's fast forward 9 months, right? So in October, where did you end up?
October, it's like as many Baruch students know, it's OCR season. So I actually ended up getting interviews with two of the biggest banks, and actually like the two on the top of my list. And I actually get to go through the interview process with them, which was something that I would never imagine that I could do back in January.
Right. And you got an offer and accepted an offer with one of the biggest banks for a job that you actually wanted, and actually ended interviews with other banks because you were still going through that process and you had to call them and tell them, well, you know what, I accepted an offer, sorry, and still maintain that relationship with those with those companies you were interviewing with. Right. So that was a huge jump, like just in 9 months, right? Comparing to where you were. So what I want to do now is to go back from January to October and talk about that process for you. So what was that process in terms of the shift that happened that made you go from July graduating without the job and not able to sending a resume and not able to get any response back, to now being able to be courted by some of the largest companies that you wanted to work for and you had on your short list?
Right. So I think it's clearly at that point I knew the approach that I took when I was in undergrad, just doing well in terms of academics wasn't enough. So I said, okay, first of all, I need to know what is it that I want. So that's why I attended so many events. I, connect with professionals. I asked them, what do they do for their job? And I talked to like many different type of professionals within the financial services industry, and I actually tailor down to specific positions that I want to apply for on like the bank's website. So that's one thing I did. And then I also knew that like I have to make myself stand out in terms of my resume. Like I have to become more valuable as a candidate. And how is it that's going to get me there besides from doing well in school? So I know that, given that I don't have I have very limited professional experience, but I can definitely shine with some sort of leadership position. So I joined, one of the biggest graduate club, and I become actually really active.
So graduate bid officer, you're part of graduate bid officer.
Yes, and even in my first semester, I volunteered to host like 2 events because even though that wasn't something that I would feel comfortable doing, like giving my personality as being more shy, but I like pushed myself out there, and I just kind of felt like if certain things that I might be afraid of, but if it's gonna make me grow, then I'll do it. So really pushing myself.
So the focus was very different, like again, from comparing to where you were coming from, where the focus was more on like, let me just do well in school, let me just get the good grades. Here it was like on growth and making myself a valuable asset to the companies I was targeting. And you did your research, you saw leadership was something that was important. And you talked about networking, you touched on networking as well when you were talking about how you went to all of these events and you connected with professionals and you started to narrow down your options in terms of what you wanted. What is it that shifted in terms of your view of networking that made you do that?
Right, like I said, last semester I signed up and went to many events. initially it was really hard for me. Like after attending one event, I almost just want to give up with all the events that I signed up afterwards because I felt so awkward. I was like in the corner of the room. I didn't know how to talk to people. I was just really nervous. And I think like my mindset was wrong. Like I had the intention that I'm going to these events to get a job, which was clearly wrong because I was really just going to these events to connect with people, to learn from them. And I think having that shift in mindset, instead of seeing this event as like directly whether I'm getting a job or not, but rather to learn and to connect with people, then it's like it makes me a whole lot less stressed out and pressured, and I become more willing to talk to people because I clearly didn't have anything to lose.
And like, was there a specific way that you approach networking that really worked for you?
Yes. So for me, for my personality, I tend to have more quality conversations when it's in smaller groups. So in the beginning, I actually attended a lot of events where maybe the attendance rate was like 100 people. And clearly for those, for me, was really intimidating. So I find that maybe coffee chats, like smaller conversation of less than 4 people really worked out for me. And because there was less people, I actually get to talk more and like get more feedback. And so that was one way that I found worked for me personally. So I would recommend for students, like networking is such a big like field, and there's definitely different approaches to it. So it's always good to understand what type of networking works for you personally and what doesn't.
As opposed to just putting yourself in big events where it's hard for you to connect with people. Put yourself in environments that it's easy.
I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with like attending all the events, but like giving that our time and energy are very limited. And if it's for someone like me, a more introverted person, it takes me a lot of energy to go to these events. So I want to like find a smarter approach and go to the events that I know I would definitely gain some value of it.
So networking can be whatever you want to make of it. I mean, it's what works best for you, and you found your sweet spot in terms of what worked for you and connected with professionals. And the other thing that you did, so you got into, you joined first graduate LSI, and you were hosting events and you were participating. Then you got into a leadership position in that club, and you were networking with professionals. The other thing that you did was that you got an internship in the interim. That wasn't in banking at all. So talk about how you were able to land that internship.
Well, so I find a posting through Xiu Ling. I applied, and then I heard back, and I go through the interview process, and eventually I did get the offer for the summer internship. And initially I did not really expect much of it because it wasn't really an ideal opportunity.
It was in government.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal for me as I want to work in private banking. But then actually I think like I didn't want to come in with that mindset, starting out my internship thinking this is not what I want. I'm not going to put in that effort. No, I took it as like I took it with gratitude and said, this is a good opportunity. And I want to learn from these people. So actually it was such an amazing opportunity for me. My team was really smart, and something that I really appreciate about them is that they would go out of their way to help me grow as a student and as an intern, as someone who's just starting out in the industry. And so, I just really try to give myself like, I try to make use of the opportunity, and I learn to build relationship. I actually have coffee chats with like the people on my team all the time, and I ask them about like, the advice on work, on life, all that. So I think even if, you might not land that dream job, but like if you are able to get an opportunity before that, I think you should always like make the use of it and try to learn as much as you can.
Right, and that's part of building the value in terms of what you have to offer, because there were still skills that you were learning in that role that positioned you for the roles that you actually were targeting.
Right. So throughout my internship, I actually learned a lot about how to work with people in a professional setting.
Mm-hmm.
And like I actually have like concrete examples of projects where maybe I have some disagreement with another team member, with another intern, and those turn out to be like amazing stories that I could tell in my future interviews, and my interviewers really like them. And so like I said, when I came in, I didn't expect those, but because I kind of like appreciate it and I tried to learn as much as I could, it ended up having a lot of results that I wasn't expecting in a good way.
Right, because you have to work as a part of a team in almost any organization that you're part of, so that's like really valuable skills as well.
And I mean, the teamwork thing is kind of like it's a very common interview questions, because wherever we work, like whatever job we have, it's always working in team, not like
right.
alone.
And all behavioral type questions tend to focus around people type issues,
right.
And of course if you're not working with people, it's going to be hard to come up with really great stories to share. But one of the other things that you told me that really struck me about you was that because you had done your research, prior to even landing this internship about getting into financial services, you knew the hiring process in terms of that they start, in the fall semester to hire for the following year. And when did you start preparing for those interviews in that process?
I actually did not know that in undergrad. Like I said, I was lacking a lot in terms of like industry knowledge. I didn't know how the recruiting process works.
So undergrad, you didn't do any research?
I didn't know
anything?
Yeah, like I graduated in May. I was looking for summer internship starting June. Clearly, I couldn't find anything because the timing was so off. But like luckily, when I got in, when I started in the spring semester, I heard a lot of students talk about OCR. And then so that's when I started to look up the timing for the recruiting process. And I know that, for the summer internship, say for next year, they actually start recruiting 1 year prior. So last semester I already start preparing for looking up what are some of the companies that I wanted to work for, and maybe try to get a sense of when they start the recruiting process. So for me, actually, for the OCR interviews, I actually start preparing like maybe end of May, when I early June, when I started my internship, and I start to come in regularly to GCMC starting in June, like trying to perfect my resume and all that and update that with my new summer internship.
So by the time that September came around, you were ready, you were ready. And I must say that the offer that you did end up with accepting didn't come through OCR. It was actually from your own initiative and doing that on your own. You did get called for OCR opportunities, but the job that you ended up taking wasn't OCR because this was not a company that actively recruits at the graduate level here at Baruch.
Right, they don't really come on campus.
But you knew this was the company that you wanted to work for.
Yeah, so it's like my dream company. I know I wanted to work there. So I just, pay attention to like how often they put up the job applications, and I know actually they do it like early July. But it took me some time to like work on my resume or that with GCMC. So I ended up applying in August. But all of this, I wouldn't have known if I didn't do the research.
Right. And I know also as part of preparing for that, you reached out to students who had offers from that company. You talked to them and you got information from them, so you knew what you were getting yourself into.
Yeah, I try to utilize LinkedIn. I try to, check whether they're alumni that I can connect with through LinkedIn that work in this company, and whether I can like ask them out for a coffee chat, maybe just even 15 minutes if they're busy, and ask them for, what is one advice that you could give me for me to do well in my interviews. And I think it's always about being creative in terms of strategies, like what if I want to work for this company, I know it's competitive, what is it that I can do differently that's going to make me stand out, or that's going to make me, that's going to help me the most in terms of interviews, so I'll do that.
Yeah, and I definitely see how much you've grown, like from the time that I've known you to even now, the confidence and all of that shows. And one of the things that you told me, when we met for a session, is that you talk about competition among students, and you also said in undergrad, like you compared yourself a lot to your peers and seeing what they were doing and how they were landing jobs, and also that would lead to, this kind of frustration and why wasn't it happening to you when you had good grades. How do you look at like other students and in terms of the competition? So
when I first started at Baruch, the first thing that I could feel in terms of the vibe of this environment was competition. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like everyone is always just fighting for the next opportunity because I mean the opportunities are limited and we have so many Baruch students wanting maybe the same jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first impression of Baruch, honestly, was very competitive. But after joining GBAP and after working with other people, I learned to kind of not see this process as being like competition, but more as collaboration, working with other people and learning from other people. Because I think it's because I know that other people go through the same process as me. And I know for them, even if we apply to the same job, I know like personally what they go through or how much they put in to get those job opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And because I know what's happening behind the stage, I start to not see it as I'm competing with another student that I know for this job, but it's like we're working together to like become more valuable candidates. And maybe even if she or he got this job that I really wanted, I didn't get it, but it's like maybe I'll try better next time. But like with this process, I like kind of go into more as in can we work together to become better versions of ourselves rather than we're competing with each other. Because I think like if you think of it in terms of collaboration, it's more positive. And I think being more positive, good things just come along.
Yeah, and I've seen like in terms of your participation in the club and all of that, like how much you give back to students in your role in GBAP as well. So I think that's like really a great thing. And one of the things students tell me all the time how hard it is, and in terms of landing a job. And when I look at you and I see other students who are able to do this in 9 months and a year, like to make this massive turnaround that seemed almost impossible, only a year ago, like that's really commendable, right? And what I think sometimes when you talk about competition, what a lot of students see is they see the end result. Well, this person ended up at a big four, or they ended up at a big bank, or like they ended up at another company that a lot of students are targeting. But what students don't see is what happened behind the scenes, because behind the scenes you took like it was a lot of action on your part and self-responsibility, really realizing like nobody was going to do this for you. You had to step up and you had to do it. And that's like one of the things I really admire about you and other students I see who succeed, because it's not GCMC, we're here to advise you, we're here to give you all the tools, but at the end of the day, like we can't really do it for you, right? It's like you have to take that step and do it for yourself. And that's like one of the things.
Right. I feel like oftentimes students, including myself, like we just tend to be so goal-oriented and future-oriented towards that one end result that we want, that one dream job, that we don't really appreciate ourselves enough for like the small steps or small accomplishments that we make along the way. And I think sometimes maybe just writing down like your accomplishments on paper, and when at times when you feel like you're failing at something and you look at that list and you think, wow, this is how much I've walked since that point. And then I think that it will be like more of a reflection point, and I think students will end up being able to appreciate the smaller steps rather than just focusing on that one big end result.
And I think that's like a great point, because it was one step at a time that you took, but it was also focusing on the right things. Like I felt like in that period you were on the right track and you knew where you wanted to go because you had done this groundwork.
Right. Actually, I did not start off on the right track. I start off like trying to do everything possible. It's like I think GCMC, a career center, the mission is to offer students with as many resources as possible and lay it out on the table. But I think it's the responsibility of the students to see what's on the table, but like selectively choose the items that they know will work for them.
Right.
Because I remember like last spring in the beginning of the semester, I make a list of like 30 items that I wanted to do, and then 2 months in I went back to that list and I saw that I trying to check off the boxes, and I saw that I only did like 5 out of the 30 things, and I was already dead tired. So at that point I knew I had to change my approach, because it's like our time and our energy are very limited. It's not possible for me to do all those 30 things. And so I think it's always trying to come up with an approach that works for you.
So based on what you share, there's so many valuable lessons here I think students can take away from your story. Starting with getting clear in terms of what it is that they want, using the GCMC, networking, collaborating with other students, getting involved, and even in the approach they take and the focus that they have. So what's other advice, or what are other pieces of advice that you would want to share with student in terms of what you've learned over the course of the last 9 months, 10 months or so?
Right. So, now that I've gone through the whole process, and as I look back, I think one piece of advice that I would give to myself or to other students in general is just to like appreciate your small accomplishment more, like appreciate each smaller steps, and know that when something doesn't happen the way that you wanted it to be, it's not really a failure. Like there's nothing wrong with you, but rather try to see that failure as a piece of feedback, as in like it's trying to tell you maybe your approach isn't working out, maybe you can try something new, something different. So I think it's like basically try to have a more like a positive mindset about everything, and mindset is something that's it takes a lot of time to work on. So if one thing doesn't flow as natural to you, you just know that this is part of the experience, and know that like eventually you'll get there. And I mean, if I were to tell myself this like 6 months ago, I would not really believe it. But now that all that have happened, and I try to look back, really like every little step happened for a reason, and without that one step or even that one little failure, I wouldn't have been where I am today. So I just appreciate that and try to like feel the experience and not just focus on the final result, and take some time to love yourself and do the things that you like.
And what would you say is the biggest change that happened since January, since starting here at Zicklin?
Definitely, I think it's my energy. Like I feel like when back in January, I was still kind of in that like depression mode because I couldn't find a job, and I feel like anywhere I go, I carry this kind of like negative energy because I was depressed. And now that I am a whole lot happier, not because the process ended up working out for me. Actually, it's because I decided to become more positive. That's when the good opportunities come along. Not that good opportunities happen after, like not that good opportunities happen and then I become a more positive person. It was because I learned to become a more positive person that good things happen to me. Yeah. Because I think positive energies attract.
Yeah, and I think like that's the epitome of like just self-leadership and doing the work and realize that you're responsible for the results you get.
Really, and if you feel stressed out about all of this, just take some time to care for yourself. Like if you for me, like if I get really stressed, I literally just go cry, and I'm okay with that. And like after I cry, I feel like I come back and I'm recharged. But back then I would like refuse to cry because I kind of see that as like a sign of weakness or something. But really, it's just like if crying works for me, crying's a way for me to relieve my stress, and I'll do it.
I just I think your story, again, it's such an amazing progression, and one of the things that you said, like one step at a time is how you got here, and I hope that's what students like take away from your journey, like how much growth can happen once you focus, once you take those steps. And come into GCMC, we're always here to help you do that. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing, Xiu Ling, because I think a lot of students can really learn from this. And I think you're such an inspiration in terms of really making it happen.
I think honestly, I think that all Brook students have the potential to. They have a lot of potential to achieve what they want in life, and I honestly believe in the Brook students. So I hope that my stories can be helpful to some students.